All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Dolphins Country Podcast. Took a couple weeks off, but we are back. Obviously, free agency has kind of come and gone. It's still kind of going on. The Dolphins, obviously not heavy spenders this free agency period. I mean, we had a lot of one-year deals. Jalen Tolbert, Tutu Atwell, a couple pass rushers we got in. But overall, the Dolphins were not heavy spenders. The big move, obviously, that the Miami Dolphins made, which I did touch on earlier when it happened, was they brought in Malik Willis to be their new franchise quarterback and or bridge quarterback, depending on how it goes. It's only a 3-year deal, but it kind of reads more as a 2-year deal. It's 3 years, $67 million. It's only about $22.5 million a year. It's really not that bad. It's about like the Justin Fields contract, which was handed out last year from the New York Jets, or by the New York Jets. It's easily, you can get out of it after a year or two. My guess is obviously he's a starter for next year. That's kind of a no-brainer. You don't pay him $22.5 million on average to not start. So that would kind of negate the idea of Quinn Ewers being the kind of the tank commander for a full 17-game season. It'll certainly be Malik Willis, at least for next year. And depending on how next year goes, which it certainly looks like it won't be any good, maybe they draft a quarterback in the next year's draft and still have Malik Willis there, making not that much money. Obviously, $22.5 million is only he's only the 22nd highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So he's really not that, it's not like it's a massive contract. It's like, well, why would you make this kind of deal if you don't, like they could absolutely draft a quarterback next year in the draft and have, Malik Willis making bridge quarterback money like Geno Smith, Justin Fields money, and maybe even start next year as the starting quarterback as we go into our next phase. You saw it with Ryan Fitzpatrick when he got here for a year and he was good, and then, mentored Tua and started the next year with rookie Tua. So it's not uncommon to think that Malik Willis, will be here all 3 years of the deal, or just 1 year, or maybe even starting year 2 in 2027 if he's a starting quarterback, next year. But certainly for this upcoming season, it'll be him at the helm. Now, we get a lot of questions. Who would be the guys surrounding Malik Willis? The answer is it won't be Jaylen Waddle. So the Dolphins' top receiver, Jaylen Waddle, obviously was just traded yesterday. This is now me reacting to the trade. Obviously, we knew Tyreek would be gone, so that was kind of a no-brainer. We knew he would be a pre-June 1st cut. We knew it would be a pre-March 11th cut because obviously the March 11th was the start of the new league year, which was just last week. This time last week, last Wednesday. So we knew he would be cut before last Wednesday because if Tyreek Hill was just even on the team by the start of the new league year, March 11th last week, then it would have been the guaranteed money would have been kicked in. So obviously we needed him off of the roster by the start of the new league year. So obviously Tyreek, we knew he would be cut. Bradley Chubb, we had a good feeling would be cut. I know I mentioned in one of my stories, either Bradley Chubb has to take another restructured pay cut, which would be 2 years in a row of Bradley Chubb taking pay cuts, or the Dolphins will just have to get rid of him because he's just too expensive to be on the roster at that cap hit. So not surprised the Dolphins were going to be cutting Bradley Chubb and Tyreek Hill. The shocker, it wasn't a shocker, but the Tua one, we knew he would either be traded or cut. I personally had the stance of just keep him. It's actually cheaper to keep him on your roster. It's what Atlanta did with Kirk Cousins for a year, and then they were able to get out of the Kirk Cousins deal, obviously. After this year, you can get out of the Tua contract. They obviously were not going to ever do that, and I kind of knew they weren't going to do that, so it's not a surprise to me that they ended up cutting Tua, making him a post-June 1st cut. So they're going to split the dead cap, the $99.2 million dead cap charge, into 2 years. So for this upcoming season, we're going to be paying Tua, I think that the cap hit on Tua is like $67 million. And then in 2027, it'll be $31 or $32 million against our cap in 2027. So obviously, it limits what we can do in this year, 2026. Obviously, it limits what we can do in free agency this year because we really don't have the money. We have to pay all these dead cap charges to Tyreek and Tua, and still Jalen Ramsey, actually. And that was not all the moves the Dolphins made. The Dolphins obviously also traded Mike Fitzpatrick to the New York Jets, a division rival. Not surprised about this. I really did think that they would keep Minka just because he was too valuable to lose for nothing. So I knew they wouldn't cut him, and they didn't cut him. But getting a 7th-round pick for him is really like nothing. Like I said at the deadline, if you're going to sell all the parts. Don't just sell Jalen Phillips. Sell all the valuable pieces you have while they are still valuable. And I thought at the deadline they could have maybe got something a little bit more than a 7th-round pick for Mike Fitzpatrick. They could have got something a little bit better for Bradley Chubb instead of having just cut him and cut your losses. Which is what they did here. So Bradley Chubb, Mike Fitzpatrick, 2 veteran guys who were still on the team post-trade deadline. They helped us get a few extra wins at the end of the season, which really did nothing for us. And then, of course, we lose kind of both of them for nothing. Obviously, Chubb being cut and then Minkah being not let go. I mean, he was traded away for a 7th-round pick. And obviously, the Jets have now restructured Minkah's deal and given him extension. It's not a bad contract by any stretch of the imagination. It was just an expensive safety. So, again, it's going to be tough to trade those kind of guys. That's why I kind of figured maybe they just keep Minkah. They didn't. They're just trying to get cheaper, and they're trying to get younger, which I totally get from John Eric Sullivan's standpoint. It's like, hey, we got to revamp this whole thing. We're going to reset this entire thing. We're going to acquire draft picks. Even if it's a 7th-round pick, we're going to acquire draft picks. We're going to get cheaper. We're going to invest in the draft. And that's what he said he was going to do, and he's doing it, obviously. Now let's get to, as we're at the 5-minute mark here, let's get to the Jaylen Waddle trade, which happened yesterday. This one kind of came out of left field. Everybody else we knew would be kind of off the team, or we had suspicions would be off the team. Jaylen Waddle, I really did think was one of the core pieces of the building blocks. Now, John Eric Sullivan did not name Jaylen Waddle when he was talking about the building blocks of this team. He mentioned Patrick Paul, our left tackle. He mentioned Devon Achane, obviously our franchise stud running back. He mentioned, I believe he mentioned Jordan Brooks. I believe he mentioned Aaron Brewer. Those guys had all pro seasons last year. I mean, those were unbelievably good players for us last year, and they're on really good contracts. So, of course, he knew those guys weren't going to go anywhere. But he didn't name Jaylen Waddle as one of those building block players. I thought he was going to. He didn't. And now Jaylen Waddle's off the team. And I certainly don't think it's not a slight to Jaylen Waddle. It's just a value thing. And I said at the deadline, if you get a first-round pick for Jaylen Waddle, I would trade him. Because you see the other guys. I mean, DK Metcalf went for a second-round pick. DJ Moore recently just went for a second-round pick. You've seen guys, receivers specifically, go for second-round picks. Good receivers go for second-round picks. I mean, I know Stephon Diggs went for a first. A.J. Brown went for a first when he was traded from Tennessee to Philly. And, I think Jaylen Waddle is, if you can get a first-round pick for him, that's good value. I mean, again, Jaylen Waddle has had some injuries in the past. I know he's only missed 6 games, but he's had a few too many visits to the Blue Medical Tent for my liking. But obviously, Jaylen Waddle, a phenomenal player, no doubt about that. And I do think he's a wide receiver 1. But again, I think value speaking here, the Dolphins' timeline is not where, say, the Denver Broncos timeline is, when they obviously traded a first-round pick for Jaylen Waddle. It's the 30th pick in the draft, so if you're Denver, you probably take the risk. With the Dolphins, you have a 27-year-old receiver who's about to have his money start kicking in, and we're not anywhere close to winning. And they recognize that. They're able to decipher that, hey, this team is in a division with Drake May and Josh Allen. We're not winning anytime soon. We have to kind of take our medicine, and again, fans don't want to hear this, but we got to kind of take our medicine for a year. We are in a bit of a predicament here that Chris Greer left us in. If you're John Eric Sullivan, that's what you're saying. We have to kind of just digest and take a year to kind of reset things, because this roster wasn't doing anything. I mean, we saw it. They were 8-9 with 2 nagging injuries. Then they bring everybody back, last band back together kind of thing, and they go 7-10. And that 7-10 was even fluky. They started 1-7. I mean, that was, or 1-6 and 2-7. The season was lost in October. Really, the season was lost the second they got off the plane in Indianapolis in week 1. They kind of laid an egg, and that was kind of a prerequisite to the entire season of just kind of like it was done before it started. So they recognize that this roster has kind of run its course. It did not win a playoff game. It peaked in 2023, obviously. Those first 2 years with Mike McDaniel, and it's been kind of going a steady, slow decline ever since. So if you keep all these guys, you're just going to be, again, hovering around that 6 or 7 win territory and not really going anywhere. So I don't hate the full teardown. This morning, Adam Schefter tweeted out the Dolphins are not going to be making a Devon Achane available. I'm really good with that. But again, I said the same thing mid-season at the deadline. I said, hey, if you get a first-round pick for a running back, that's unbelievable value. I don't think anyone's going to be offering a first-round pick for a running back, but I did see things floated out about, if Seattle offers the 32nd pick in the draft, the very last pick of round 1, is that enough to move Devon Achane? I said again, prime Christian McCaffrey didn't even go for a first-round pick when he got traded from Carolina to San Francisco. He got like a 2, a 3, a 2, I think 2 3s and a 5 or something like that. It was a good package. It was a second-round pick, 2 3s, 5th-round pick, and, obviously it's running back money, so, you take on that deal, but McCaffrey's unbelievable. Achane is, in his own right, unique to our offense and to our fan base. I mean, he's one of the best players at the running back position in the league, so you don't want to just give him up for nothing. I just think it would take a knock-your-socks-off offer for John Eric Sullivan to actually trade that guy, and obviously, as we heard this morning, he is not available right now. He's not like for sale. Like, you can't just. I know GMs are calling about Devon Achane because they just saw Jaylen Waddle get traded, and they're thinking, okay, the Dolphins just going to trade everybody. I don't think that's the case. I think that was just a value thing for Waddle. You get a first-round pick for Waddle, you get a third-round pick for him, and a fourth-round pick swap. So I think you take that if you're Miami. I do think it's a good haul. And again, I'm not saying that Waddle's not worth that. I think he absolutely is worth the risk for Denver, too. I'm just saying for our timeline, we would rather have the picks at this point and get cheaper with our timeline and our situation than have Jaylen Waddle in his prime at age 27. You know, he can have 1,000-yard seasons, but what is it going to really lead to? Yeah, it might help Malik Willis' development, but what is that really doing with our franchise? I mean, do we want to become the Steelers or the Falcons, winning 7 or 8 games a year with the Steelers 9 wins a year? No, I don't want to be them. Like, I'd rather just, take my lumps for a year, take my medicine for a year, and redo this thing the right way, which I think he's going about it the right way. All right, so let's talk about the Dolphins draft capital now, because we do have a lot of draft picks in this upcoming NFL draft, so we got to start talking about the draft, obviously. We obviously have our own pick in the first round this year, which is 11th overall. It seems to be in a good spot right now. If you look at the draft boards every day, what's slated to be there. Again, obviously this roster they have a ton of needs. We have a ton of needs on this roster currently. But 11, you look at, there could certainly be one of those Ohio State Buckeye defenders that could fall to 11. There obviously now is their need at receiver. There could be one of those 3 receivers, Mekhi Lemon, Carnell Tate, or Jordan Tyson. They can all certainly be there at 11. Safety is obviously a prevalent need. Caleb Downs. Corner is a prevalent need. I know they signed a lot of one-year corners who don't have much experience. I know the Titans guy, Darnell Baker, gave, I believe, a 105 rating last year. So again, they brought in a lot of DBs who are tall but don't really have much productive. They haven't been that productive in the league so far. So we'll see what the cornerback room looks like next year. I would still definitely add to that position because there's really no guy right now that you even look at and be like, oh, that's a really good player. I know Juju Brents had a couple of good games last year. Kader Kohu is now in Kansas City, so that would have been our nickel. Storm Duck is still here. I don't imagine what this cornerback room is going to look like next year, but I would certainly consider drafting one at 11. There's Mansour Delane, who's a phenomenal player. There's Jermon McCoy, who I know was out all last year at Tennessee, but he's a phenomenal player as well. I know this regime doesn't want to draft injury past players, so maybe that would rule out a Jordan Tyson. Maybe that would rule out Jermon McCoy. But either way, I think those are really, really high-level players. So the Dolphins' current draft pick, they have pick number 11 in the first round, obviously our own. We now have pick 30 in the first round, so we'll have 2 selections in the first round this year on the first round of the NFL draft. We have Denver's first-round pick, obviously, which is 30 overall. Then we have in the second round, we have our own second-round pick, which is 43rd overall. And then we also have now 4 third-round picks. So 4 third-round picks. I truly believe day 2, which is rounds 2 and 3, is where the meat and bones of the draft are. That's where you can really make your mark as a GM. You've seen so many times Seattle does it, where they kind of ace day 2 in the draft. They got Nick Emmanwori last year on day 2. These GMs are really, really smart. Baltimore's GM, like these GMs that nail the second and third round specifically, which is day 2, obviously in the NFL draft. So we have 4 third-round picks, 75 overall, which is our own. We have Philadelphia's first third-round pick, which is 87th overall from the Jalen Phillips trade. We have the Houston Texans pick, which is 90th overall, just 3 picks later from the Eagles. And then we have the 94th overall pick, which is Denver's. So again, 3 late third-round picks, because obviously Philadelphia, Houston, and Denver were all playoff teams last year. But again, 87, 90, and 94. So we have 3 picks in a 7-pick span down there late in the third round, as well as obviously our own with 75th overall in the third round. And then obviously we also have a 4th-round pick from Denver, which is a pick swap. So we have 7 picks in the top 100, 7 picks in the top 94, 8 picks in the top 130, and then obviously we have our own 5th-round pick, and then we don't pick again until the 7th round. But nonetheless, those first 7 or 8 picks are going to really decide this draft. If you can get 5 day 1 starters and go 5 of 7 with these top 94 picks, that would be really nice. Obviously, you'd love to go 7 for 7. That would be obviously a heck of a way to start a rebuild if you're John Eric Sullivan. That would be like what Brad Holmes did at Detroit in his first draft with Dan Campbell. So you're hoping, obviously, to go and nail all 7 of these top 94 picks. But obviously, I'm looking at 11, I'm looking at 30, I'm looking at 43, I'm looking at 75, and I'm looking at 87. If those first 5 picks, can you get me 5 day 1 starters? And then those 2 really late third-round picks, 90 and 94, depth is where you're starting to look at depth. But again, this roster has so many holes, so many needs. You kind of have to hit all these picks. Like, you really do have to hit all these picks for us to be looking at a positive outlook on next season and the season after that, obviously. Because right now this roster looks like it is, full tank show right now. And that leads me back to my point about Malik Willis. So how did this Jaylen Waddle trade affect him? Because now he's without his top receiver. He just signed here a couple days ago, and a couple days later, his top receiver gets traded. So now from Malik Willis, he's got Malik Washington to throw the ball to. He's got Tutu Atwell, Jalen Tolbert, who I know he's friends with. I think they had some connection at the Senior Bowl when they were both in the same draft class. I believe Terrace Marshall as well, Theo Weiss. So again, this receiver room is kind of a who's who. Is like, okay, we got some guys who have been, kicked around other teams. Terrace Marshall, Tutu Atwell was kind of buried at the Rams depth chart. Obviously, that's a really good receiver room, but now he's kind of like one of our prized guys in our receiver room. Kind of goes the difference of rooms there. He's getting a big increase in time of snaps, I would assume, because he's in the receiver room where it's like, who's really any good here? Malik Washington, more of a gadget guy, if anything else. So we'll see what we do here. I think, honestly, gun to my head, I think Devon Achane's our best receiver, obviously, on this team, even though he's a running back. Like, he's straight up our best pass catcher at this point in time. I know they re-upped Greg Dulcich, who had a really nice season, good after the catch. But we don't know what this offense is going to look like. I really think that they could attack a bunch of different things during the NFL draft, starting with, obviously, DB. I don't know what our safety room looks like at all right now. Like, if you can tell me what our safeties have done, go. Good luck, because obviously Minka's no longer here. They brought over the guy from Green Bay, not a starting safety for them, but a safety. It's a very thin safety room currently, and then the DBs they don't really have anything to show for them. They're not as productive defensive backs. So the corner room, the safety room, the entire defensive back room could be drafted, and I would have nowhere. I just want Jeff Hafley to kind of pick out who he thinks is a young, promising prospect that kind of can fit in his scheme. And they can kind of turn us into these, this young, nice defense that you saw in Seattle. You certainly saw it in Green Bay with Jeff Hafley. But those are kind of the nucleus of your team. If you've seen these Super Bowl run teams recently, it's been led through the draft and defensively. If you can get your defensive picks in there and build a solid unit, obviously you can create a winning team. And then getting back to the quarterback with Malik Willis here. He doesn't have much to work with. Like, I'm going to be real. I like Malik Willis. I really was not a fan of signing him because I thought it would be an overpay, and it was not an overpay, so I'm totally fine with the deal. I just don't think he's solving any problems. Like, the Dolphins fans that kind of assumed he's going to fix all of our problems. Like, we were close to winning. We just needed to replace Tua. Like, the roster didn't have so many holes. Like, that's not the case. Like, obviously, he's not just replacing Tua. He's entering a roster that is much worse than the ones we've had in years past. So it's going to be difficult for him. The good news is there's familiarity with him and obviously Jeff Hafley and Gerald Eric Sullivan. They're all from Green Bay, so they've watched him every day in practice for the last 2 years. So we'll see how it looks. Overall, I'm fine with the Jaylen Waddle haul because I do think it is a haul. Now we wait until April and see what they're able to turn these picks into. They have money to spend now. I mean, they can't spend money on this free agency class, but they have extensions to give out. Like, they can't just have $100 million sitting nowhere. So who gets extended? My guess would be Devon Achane gets extended. He's extension eligible this year. Aaron Brewer is extension eligible this year, and then Jordan Brooks. Those are probably our three best players right there, and they're all on three really good contracts. Like Jordan Brooks, say what you want about Chris Greer, he did get Jordan Brooks at he kind of robbed Jordan Brooks. Like, he's got him at like a very cheap deal. Aaron Brewer, same thing. He was kind of like a flyer. It's like, hey, we'll sign Aaron Brewer. He turned into a Pro Bowl level center, obviously, last year for us. So those three guys for sure are like the nucleus. Obviously, Patrick Paul as well on a rookie deal. So those guys aren't making anything really. So those are all extension eligible guys that I would prefer to keep in the building. Because you have to have some building blocks. You can't tear the whole thing down. I mean, obviously, you got to get rid of some guys just to get cap compliant, and they did. And you can't have expensive safeties. You can't have expensive pass rushers who are older and Bradley Chubb. You can't have Tyreek Hill, who's an expensive receiver, who's obviously coming off an injury. So I totally get getting rid of those guys. But I do think that the Waddle one caught me a little by surprise, and I said I better be a first-round pick because if it's anything less, I feel like might as well just hold on to him. And it wasn't just a first-round pick; it was a first and a third, and again a fourth-round pick swap. So I think it's good business. I think it's good value. I think you're winning the value market there. And we'll see what happens. At this point now, it comes down to can you nail the draft picks. I'm definitely going to be doing more mock drafts in the future here in the coming weeks as we get closer to April. So be on the lookout for that. But right now, I'm going to give John Eric Sullivan a round of applause. And we'll see if he can nail these draft picks in April because that's really going to dictate whether or not this season will be worth watching. Because right now the Dolphins obviously will not be good next year, but will they at least have some young, entertaining pieces that we can at least watch next year on the team? That's the big question that will be heading into April. But until next time, thank you guys for listening to this podcast, and we will see you next time.